The notification chimed at 11:47 p.m., cutting through the silence of our bedroom like a knife through butter. Daphne's phone, face down on her nightstand as always these days, lit up the ceiling with that familiar blue glow. She was already asleep, or pretending to be, curled away from me in that practiced way that said, "Don't touch," without using words. I should have rolled over and minded my own business, should have let sleeping dogs lie. But curiosity has consequences, and I've always been more feline than canine. The message preview was just visible enough to make me freeze. "I'm meeting my ex alone tomorrow. Don't stress." Don't stress? I'm Colton Reyes, 38 years old, logistics coordinator for a mid-sized shipping company, and apparently the kind of husband who finds out his wife is planning secret meetings through late-night text messages. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days tracking packages across the country, but I couldn't track what was happening in my own marriage. Daphne stirred beside me, her auburn hair catching the streetlight filtering through our bedroom blinds. 15 years of marriage, and I thought I knew every expression that crossed her face. Lately, though, she'd been wearing a new one, secretive, almost smug, like she was holding the winning lottery ticket and couldn't wait to cash it in. Our house sat on Maple Street in the kind of middle-class neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business, except, apparently, I didn't know my own. The Hendersons next door had their porch light on, as usual. Mrs. Kessler across the street was probably peeking through her curtains, cataloging who came home when and with whom. Every yard was a stage, every neighbor a critic, and I was apparently the last person to realize I was starring in a drama. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Daphne, and padded downstairs to my home office. The room was cluttered with shipping manifests, my old boxing gloves hanging from a hook by the window, and a stack of bills that seemed to grow taller every week. But tucked behind my computer monitor was something Daphne didn't know about, a small notebook where I kept track of things. Important things, like the fact that she'd been working late 3 nights a week for the past 2 months, always on different days, always with vague explanations about inventory and end-of-month reports. Daphne worked as an office manager at Hartwell Pharmaceuticals, a job that had never required late nights until recently. She'd been distant, distracted, always checking her phone and angling it away from me when she typed. Classic signs, really. The kind of things they write about in those articles about "Is your spouse cheating?" that I'd never thought I'd need to read. I opened my laptop and logged into our shared phone plan. One of the perks of being married to someone who wasn't tech-savvy, she'd never bothered to change the account passwords. Her text history was right there, laid out like evidence in a trial I didn't want to be part of. Trevor Holt. The name appeared dozens of times over the past 6 weeks. Trevor, her ex-boyfriend from college. Trevor, who owned a used car dealership on the south side of town and drove around in a red Corvette like he was compensating for something. Trevor, who'd been messaging my wife about catching up and remembering the good times. The messages weren't explicitly romantic, but they didn't need to be. I could read between the lines like a logistics expert reading a shipping manifest. The subtext was clear. They'd been meeting for coffee, talking about what might have been, and planning more private encounters. I screenshotted everything, my hands surprisingly steady. 20 years of amateur boxing had taught me to stay calm under pressure, to think before throwing punches. This situation called for the same discipline, the same strategic thinking that had kept me from getting knocked out in the ring. My phone buzzed. A text from my buddy Jake at the Crowbar, our local dive bar. "You coming out tomorrow? Need someone to remind me why I'm still single." The Crowbar was the kind of place where men went to sweat out their problems instead of talking about them. Cracked leather booths, neon beer signs that flickered more than they shone, and bartenders who poured heavy and asked no questions. It was my sanctuary, the place where I could be myself without pretending everything was perfect. I typed back, "Yeah, I'll be there. Might need a few extra drinks tomorrow. Rough day at work?" Something like that. I set the phone down and stared at the screenshots on my laptop screen. 15 years of marriage, reduced to digital evidence of betrayal. Our son Danny was only 10, old enough to sense tension, but young enough to still believe his parents were invincible. What would this do to him? The smart play would be to confront Daphne directly, to have an adult conversation about what was happening to our marriage. But I'd tried that approach 6 months ago when I first noticed her pulling away. She dismissed my concerns, told me I was being paranoid, made me feel like the problem was my imagination rather than her behavior. No, this called for a different strategy, something more comprehensive. I pulled up the contact information for Trevor's wife, Elena. I'd met her a few times at community events. Sharp, intelligent, the kind of woman who didn't miss much. If Trevor was sniffing around my wife, Elena deserved to know. And if I was going to play this game, I might as well play it with an ally. The clock on my computer showed 12:23 a.m. Too late to call, but not too late to plan. I opened a new document and started typing, laying out everything I knew, everything I suspected, and everything I intended to do about it. They wanted to play games? Fine. But they were about to learn that I didn't just coordinate shipping routes, I could coordinate a response that would leave them both wondering what hit them. I cracked my knuckles, a habit left over from my boxing days, and got to work. If Daphne and Trevor thought they were being clever, they were about to discover that I'd been underestimated for the last time. The house settled around me, creaking in that familiar way that usually felt comforting. Tonight, it sounded like a warning. Morning came with the usual suburban theater. Daphne emerged from the shower wrapped in a towel, humming some song I didn't recognize while she applied makeup with the precision of someone preparing for an audience. She'd always been beautiful, auburn hair that caught the light just right, green eyes that could stop traffic, and a smile that had hooked me in college and kept me hooked for 15 years. "You're up early," she said, not quite meeting my eyes in the bathroom mirror. Couldn't sleep. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her routine. "Big day today?" "The usual, inventory meeting with the regional manager." The lie came so smoothly I almost admired the technique. "Might run late again." "Again?" She paused, mascara wand halfway to her lashes. "Is that a problem?" "Just seems like you've been working a lot of late nights lately. Maybe you should ask for a raise." Her laugh was forced, brittle. "I'll mention it to Mr. Hartwell." I knew for a fact that Hartwell Pharmaceuticals' regional manager was in Chicago this week. I'd verified it through their company website. But I kept that information to myself, filed away with the growing collection of evidence that my wife had become a stranger. After she left for work, I called in sick, something I rarely did, but desperate times and all that. Instead of heading to my office, I drove across town to Trevor's dealership. Holt's Auto Sales sat on a corner lot that had seen better decades, surrounded by a chain-link fence and decorated with plastic flags that snapped in the October wind. The building itself was all glass and chrome, trying too hard to look upscale while selling cars that had seen more miles than a long-haul trucker. Trevor was easy to spot, still had that quarterback build, though it was going soft around the edges. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment and moved around the lot like he owned the world, which in his mind, he probably did. I parked across the street and watched him work. He had the kind of smile that sold cars and broke up marriages, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no, at least not often enough. My phone rang. Elena Holt. "Colton, I got your message. We need to talk." Her voice was tight, controlled. I texted her at 6 a.m. with a simple message. "Call me when you're alone. It's about Trevor and my wife." "Can you meet me somewhere private?" "There's a diner on Route 9, about 10 minutes from your house. Mel's place." "I know it. 20 minutes? I'll be there." Mel's place was the kind of establishment that served coffee strong enough to wake anyone and minded its own business. Elena was already in a corner booth when I arrived, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her expression unreadable. She'd always struck me as the kind of woman who thought 3 moves ahead in every conversation. "Show me," she said without preamble. I slid my phone across the table, the screenshots already queued up. She scrolled through them with the methodical attention of someone reviewing a legal brief. Her jaw tightened with each message, but she didn't say anything until she'd seen them all. "How long?" she asked. 6 weeks that I can prove, probably longer." "And you're sure they're actually meeting?" "I checked our shared location app last night. She was at that coffee shop on 5th Street until almost midnight, the one they mentioned in their messages." Elena's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Their old spot, according to this. "You knew about that?" "Trevor's not as original as he thinks he is. He took me there on our first date, told me all about the girl who got away in college, Daphne Morrison before she became Daphne Reyes." The way she said my wife's maiden name made it sound like a curse. "What do you want to do about it?" I asked. Elena leaned back in the booth, her fingers drumming against her coffee cup. "That depends. How far are you willing to go?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you want to just catch them and file for divorce? Or do you want to make sure they both understand exactly what they've lost?" There was something in her voice that made me think Elena Holt was more dangerous than she appeared, which, given that she appeared plenty dangerous already, was saying something. "I want them to regret it," I said. "Good." She pulled out her own phone and started typing. "Because I've been waiting for an excuse to destroy my husband for 3 years. He just handed me one." 3 years? He had an affair with his secretary. I found out, he begged forgiveness, I stayed for the kids, but I never forgot, and I never forgave. I just waited. She finished typing and looked up at me. I just sent Trevor a text telling him I'm taking the kids to my mother's this weekend. That should give him and your wife plenty of rope to hang themselves with. What's the plan? Simple. We let them think they're getting away with it, document everything, and then we hit them where it hurts most. Which is? Elena's smile was arctic. Their reputations, their jobs, their sense of security, everything that makes them feel superior to the rest of us. I thought about Daphne's smug expression that morning, the casual way she'd lied to my face, the months of making me feel like I was paranoid for noticing what was right in front of me. I'm in, I said. Good. Because this is going to get ugly before it gets better. She was right about that, but as I sat in that diner, planning the downfall of my marriage and my wife's reputation, I felt more alive than I had in months. Maybe it was wrong to feel that way, but I'd been playing defense for too long. Time to go on the offensive. Elena and I spent another hour planning, exchanging phone numbers and coordinating our approach. By the time I left Mel's place, I had a partner in crime and a strategy that would make Sun Tzu proud. I drove home through neighborhoods that suddenly looked different, like I was seeing them clearly for the first time. Every perfect lawn, every pristine driveway, every house that looked like a magazine cover. It was all just theater. Behind those doors were real people with real problems, real betrayals, real secrets. At least now I knew what mine were. The crowbar was in full swing by the time I arrived that evening, the usual crowd of blue-collar workers and middle-aged guys who'd given up on pretending their lives had turned out the way they'd planned. The air was thick with cigarette smoke that wasn't supposed to be there, and the kind of honest conversation that only happened after the third beer. "You look like hell," Jake said as I slid into our usual booth. He was a construction foreman with hands like baseball mitts and a divorce behind him that had cost him everything except his sense of humor. "Feel worse than I look." "Woman trouble?" I nodded and signaled the bartender for a beer. "How'd you know?" "Same look I had when I found out about Linda and her yoga instructor. Want to talk about it?" That was the thing about the crowbar. It was where men came to sweat out their problems instead of talking about them. But sometimes talking helped. "Daphne's cheating," I said. Jake winced like I'd punched him. "You sure?" "Caught her texting her ex. They've been meeting for weeks." "Shit, man. I'm sorry." The bartender, a weathered guy named Murphy, who'd been serving drinks and wisdom in equal measure for 20 years, set down my beer and pretended not to listen. But I could see his ears perk up. Nothing stayed secret long at the crowbar. "What are you going to do?" Jake asked. "Working on it." Before I could elaborate, the front door opened and Trevor Holt walked in like he owned the place. He was dressed down from his usual dealership attire, jeans and a polo shirt that probably cost more than most people's car payments, but he still looked like he was slumming it. "Well, well," Jake muttered. "Isn't that the car guy?" Trevor scanned the room until his eyes landed on me. Instead of looking away, he smiled and walked over. "Colton Reyes, right? I'm Trevor Holt. I think we have some mutual friends." The balls on this guy. He was standing in front of the husband of the woman he was screwing around with, acting like we were old buddies. "Do we?" I kept my voice level, but my hands were already forming fists under the table. "Small town, you know how it is." "Mind if I sit?" Jake looked at me with raised eyebrows. I shrugged, curious to see where this was going. Trevor slid into the booth across from us, signaling Murphy for a drink. "Nice place. Very authentic." The way he said authentic made it sound like a disease. "It serves its purpose," I said. "I bet it does. Place for working guys to unwind, talk about their problems, maybe complain about their wives." Jake's hand tightened around his beer bottle. He might not know the details, but he could sense the tension building. "Speaking of wives," Trevor continued, "how's Daphne? I ran into her the other day, and she mentioned you've been working a lot lately." The snake was fishing, trying to figure out how much I knew. Or maybe he was just enjoying himself, playing with the husband of his latest conquest. "She's fine," I said, "busy with her own work. You know how it is with pharmaceutical companies, lots of late nights, lots of meetings." Trevor's smile faltered slightly. He wasn't sure if I was being naive or sarcastic. "Well, if you ever need someone to keep her company while you're working, I'm sure she's got plenty of friends to call." That was it. I stood up slowly, using the movement to mask the fact that I was positioning myself for a fight. "Actually, Trevor, I think she's got all the company she needs." "I'm sure she does." The subtext was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Jake stood up too, reading the situation correctly. "Maybe you should head back to your side of town," Jake said to Trevor. "This place might be a little too authentic for you." Trevor looked around the bar, taking in the hostile stares from the other patrons who'd been listening to our conversation. The crowbar might not be fancy, but it was loyal to its own. "You're probably right," Trevor said, standing. "Nice talking to you, Colton. Tell Daphne I said hello." He dropped a 20 on the table and walked out, but not before turning back with that same smug smile. "Prick," Jake muttered. "Yeah. So that's the guy?" "That's the guy. What's the plan?" I sat back down and took a long pull from my beer. "I'm going to destroy him." "How?" "Carefully." Jake nodded like that made perfect sense. In our world, it did. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of beer and planning. By closing time, I had a clearer picture of what I was dealing with. Trevor wasn't just someone having an affair, he was predatory, someone who enjoyed the pursuit as much as the outcome. The way he'd talked about Daphne, the casual cruelty in his voice when he mentioned keeping her company, it all pointed to someone who got off on taking what belonged to other men. I drove home through empty streets, past houses where normal people were sleeping peacefully next to spouses who weren't betraying them. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was probably the only person in the neighborhood who knew exactly where he stood. Daphne was already asleep when I got home, or pretending to be. Her phone was charging on the nightstand, face down as always. I resisted the urge to check her messages again. I already knew what I'd find. Instead, I went to my office and opened my laptop. Elena had sent me an email with the subject line, "Weekend plans." The message was brief. "He took the bait, told me he's got a business trip this weekend. I'll be at my mother's with the kids. Whatever they're planning, we'll know about it." I typed back, "Good. Let me know when and where." Then I opened a new document and started planning phase 2 of what I was already thinking of as the Trevor problem. He wanted to play games with my wife? Fine. But he was about to learn that some games have consequences. I worked until 3 a.m., mapping out a strategy that would make my logistics training proud. Every move calculated, every contingency planned, every possible outcome accounted for. By the time I finally went to bed, I was smiling. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made everything seem possible. Daphne was up early, showering and dressing with more care than she usually took for weekend errands. She hummed while she did her makeup, the same mysterious song from earlier in the week. "Going somewhere special?" I asked from the bedroom doorway. "Just meeting Sarah for lunch and shopping. Girl time, you know?" Sarah was her friend from work, a divorced woman who'd been encouraging Daphne's independence lately. Convenient alibi, except I'd already checked Sarah's social media and knew she was in Cleveland visiting her sister this weekend. "Sounds fun. Where are you planning to go?" "Oh, just around. Maybe that new place downtown." More lies, delivered with the casual confidence of someone who thought she was smarter than everyone else in the room. "Well, have fun. I'll probably just watch the game and work on some projects around the house." She kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture that felt like a business transaction, and headed out. Through the front window, I watched her drive away in her Honda Civic, probably toward whatever romantic rendezvous she and Trevor had planned. My phone buzzed. Elena. "They're both lying about where they're going. Trevor told me he had a business meeting in Columbus. Your wife?" "Shopping with a friend who's out of town." "Amateurs. I've got the tracker app on Trevor's phone. He's heading toward the Marriott on the east side." "The one by the highway?" "That's the one. How do you want to play this?" I'd been thinking about that question all week. The smart move would be to gather evidence for the divorce proceedings, take pictures, document the affair, and let the lawyers handle the rest. But Trevor's visit to the crowbar had changed things. He wasn't just having an affair, he was taunting me, enjoying the game of stealing another man's wife. "I want to shake things up," I said. "What did you have in mind?" "How would you feel about crashing their party?" Elena's laugh was sharp and dangerous. "I thought you'd never ask." We met at a gas station near the hotel, two wronged spouses planning a confrontation that would make our cheating partners wish they'd stayed home. Elena had traded her usual professional attire for jeans and a leather jacket that made her look like she was ready for war. "Trevor's car is in the parking lot," she said, pointing toward a red Corvette that screamed midlife crisis. "Third floor, room 314. I called the hotel pretending to be his assistant and confirmed the reservation." "How do you want to do this?" "Simple. We knock on the door and see what happens." "That's it?" "Sometimes the direct approach is best." We took the elevator to the third floor, the tension building with each floor we passed. I'd been in plenty of fights during my boxing days, but this felt different, more personal, more consequential. Room 314 was at the end of the hallway, away from the elevator and the ice machines. Private. Perfect for a secret rendezvous, except secrets have a way of coming to light when you least expect them. Elena raised her hand to knock, then paused. You ready for this? She asked. Are you? I've been ready for 3 years. She knocked. 3 sharp raps that echoed down the hallway like gunshots. Shuffling sounds from inside the room. Whispered voices. More shuffling. Who is it? Trevor's voice, trying to sound casual but failing. Hotel management, Elena said in a voice I didn't recognize. We need to check the air conditioning unit. There's been a problem with the system on this floor. More whispered conversation. Footsteps approaching the door. The door opened, and Trevor appeared wearing a hotel bathrobe and a confused expression that turned to horror when he saw us standing in the hallway. Elena? What the hell are you? Surprise, honey. I pushed past him into the room, where Daphne was sitting on the edge of the bed in her underwear, frantically trying to put her clothes back on. When she saw me, her face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, guilt, anger, and finally a kind of defiant resignation. Colton. Daphne. For a moment, nobody moved. We were like actors who'd forgotten their lines in the middle of a play, frozen in a tableau that would have been funny if it wasn't destroying my life. Elena broke the silence. So, this is what a business meeting looks like these days. Trevor had recovered enough to try bluster. Elena, this isn't what it looks like. Really, because it looks like you're screwing around with another man's wife in a cheap hotel room. But please, enlighten me. Daphne stood up, having managed to get her clothes back on. Colton, we need to talk. Now you want to talk. After months of lies and secret meetings and making me feel crazy for noticing that my wife had checked out of our marriage. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You're having an affair. Trevor stepped between us, trying to assert some kind of control over the situation. Look, everyone needs to calm down. We're all adults here. I'd been calm for months. Calm while my wife lied to my face. Calm while she made excuses for working late and being distant. Calm while she slowly dismantled our marriage for the sake of reliving her college romance. I wasn't feeling calm anymore. Adults? I stepped closer to Trevor, using the height advantage I had on him. Adults don't sneak around behind their spouses' backs. Adults don't lie about business trips to cover up affairs. Adults don't show up at their lover's husband's bar to gloat about what they're doing. I wasn't gloating. Bullshit. Elena was recording everything on her phone, documenting the confrontation for future use. Smart woman. Daphne, I said, turning back to my wife. Is this what you want? Is this worth throwing away 15 years of marriage and destroying our son's family? For a moment, I thought I saw doubt in her eyes. A flicker of the woman I'd married, the one who used to laugh at my jokes and fall asleep in my arms, and make me believe that we could handle anything as long as we were together. Then Trevor put his hand on her shoulder, and the moment passed. We didn't plan for this to happen, she said. But you're not planning to stop it. No, I'm not. The finality in her voice hit me like a physical blow. 15 years of marriage, over. Just like that. Well, I said, at least now I know where I stand. I turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Trevor? Yeah? Enjoy it while it lasts, because you just bought yourself a war. Elena and I left them standing in that hotel room, probably wondering what exactly I meant by that. They'd find out soon enough. In the elevator, Elena was practically vibrating with energy. That felt good, she said. It's just the beginning. What's next? I smiled, thinking about the notebook in my office and all the planning I'd been doing. Now we get creative. Monday morning brought a new reality. Daphne moved through our house like a ghost, avoiding eye contact and speaking only when necessary. She'd spent Sunday at her sister's place, thinking about things, which I assumed meant figuring out how to spin the situation in her favor. I, on the other hand, had spent Sunday implementing phase 1 of what I'd started calling the Trevor Solution. We need to talk, Daphne said over coffee, the first full sentence she'd spoken to me since the hotel confrontation. Now you want to talk. Colton, please. This doesn't have to be ugly. It's already ugly. You made it ugly when you decided to screw around with your ex-boyfriend instead of working on our marriage. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Good. I want a divorce, she said. I figured as much. I've already retained a lawyer. That surprised her. She'd probably expected me to beg, to fight for our marriage, to give her the satisfaction of being the one who controlled the narrative. Which lawyer? Patricia Morrison. You know, the one who handled Jake's divorce, the one who got him full custody and half of everything. Daphne's face went pale. Patricia Morrison was known for being ruthless, especially when it came to protecting her clients' interests in cases involving infidelity. Colton, we can work this out between ourselves. We don't need lawyers getting involved. Too late for that. My phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Phase 1 complete. Check your email. I excused myself and went to my office, where Elena's message was waiting with a video attachment. The subject line read, Trevor's Big Day. The video showed Trevor arriving at his dealership that morning, only to find every car on the lot decorated with bright yellow flyers. I couldn't see what the flyers said from the camera angle, but Trevor's expression told me everything I needed to know. Elena had done good work. I called her. Please tell me you got permission from the lot owner before posting those flyers, I said. Of course. Turns out the property management company has been having issues with Trevor's lease payments. They were very cooperative when I explained that I was his wife and wanted to help with a promotional campaign. What did the flyers say? Ask me about my satisfaction guarantee, with his personal cell phone number. I may have also posted the same flyers on a few dating websites, Craigslist personal ads, and some very specific forums that cater to people with unusual interests. Elena, you're diabolical. I'm just getting started. The rest of the week passed in a blur of strategic strikes. Elena and I coordinated our efforts like a military campaign, hitting our targets where they were most vulnerable. Trevor's phone was flooded with calls from people responding to the flyers. His business started suffering as word spread about the promotional campaign, and people assumed he was either having a breakdown or running some kind of scam. Daphne found herself facing questions at work about her unprofessional conduct after someone anonymously sent HR photos from the hotel confrontation, along with a detailed timeline of her affair. She wasn't fired, but she was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. By Friday, both of our targets were feeling the pressure. That's when Trevor showed up at the crowbar again. This time, he wasn't alone. He'd brought Muscle, a guy who looked like he bench-pressed small cars for fun and had the kind of facial scars that suggested he wasn't afraid of a fight. We need to talk, Trevor said, sliding into the booth across from me. Jake started to get up, but I waved him off. I wanted to hear what Trevor had to say. About what? About the games you and my wife have been playing. Games? I don't know what you're talking about. Trevor leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Cut the shit, Colton. I know you've been messing with my business, my reputation, my life. It stops now. Or what? He nodded toward his muscle-bound friend. Or things get unpleasant. I looked around the crowbar. Murphy was behind the bar, polishing glasses and pretending not to listen. Jake was nursing his beer and watching the interaction with the kind of attention that suggested he was ready to jump in if needed. 3 other regulars were scattered around the room, all of them guys who'd known me for years and didn't much like the look of Trevor or his friend. You know what your problem is, Trevor? I said, loud enough for the whole bar to hear. Enlighten me. You think you're the smartest guy in the room. You think you can take whatever you want and there won't be consequences. You think that because you drive a fancy car and wear expensive clothes, you're better than the rest of us. I am better than you. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like a guy whose business is falling apart, whose wife has filed for divorce, and who's so desperate to feel tough that he brought backup to threaten a guy in his own neighborhood bar. Trevor's face was turning red. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Actually, I do. I'm dealing with a small-time car dealer who peaked in high school and has been trying to recapture his glory days ever since. I'm dealing with a man who's so insecure that he has to steal other men's wives to feel like he matters. I stood up, using my full height to tower over him. And I'm dealing with someone who made the mistake of thinking I'd just roll over and take it. Trevor's friend started to move, but Jake was already on his feet, along with the other regulars. The odds had shifted dramatically in our favor. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to leave my bar, my neighborhood, and my life. You're going to stop seeing my wife, stop calling her, stop thinking about her. And if you ever threaten me again, you're going to discover that I didn't spend 20 years boxing just for the exercise. Trevor looked around the room, calculating his chances. Even with his muscle, he was outnumbered by guys who worked with their hands for a living and weren't impressed by his designer clothes. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. He left, his friend trailing behind him like a disappointed bodyguard. The bar erupted in cheers and laughter, the regulars buying me drinks and slapping me on the back like I just won a championship fight. But I knew Trevor was right about one thing. This wasn't over. It was just moving into the next phase. I pulled out my phone and texted Elena, "Time for phase 2. Her response came back immediately. I was hoping you'd say that. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in strategic destruction. Elena and I worked together like a well-oiled machine, coordinating our attacks with the precision of a military operation. Trevor's dealership was hit with a surprise audit from the state licensing board after someone anonymously reported irregularities in his paperwork. The audit didn't find anything criminal, but it tied up his business for days and cost him thousands in legal fees. Daphne's administrative leave became permanent when the investigation into her conduct revealed that she'd been using company time and resources to conduct her personal affairs. She wasn't criminally charged, but she was fired for cause, which meant no severance package and no unemployment benefits. Elena filed for divorce and, armed with evidence of Trevor's affair, managed to secure a settlement that left him with almost nothing. The house, the cars, the business assets, everything went to her and the kids. But the real coup de grace came when I discovered something that even Elena didn't know about. I was going through Trevor's social media accounts, looking for ammunition, when I found something interesting. Photos from a business trip to Las Vegas dated from 3 years ago. The same weekend, Elena had told me about Trevor's affair with his secretary, except the photos showed Trevor with a different woman, not his secretary, not Daphne, someone else entirely. I did some digging and found out that the woman was named Michelle, and she worked at a casino in Vegas. More digging revealed that Trevor had been flying out to see her regularly for the past 3 years, spending thousands of dollars that Elena didn't know about. The secretary affair had been a smokescreen. Trevor had been running multiple relationships, using his business trips as cover for a whole other life. I presented this information to Elena over coffee at Mel's place, watching her face go through a range of emotions as she processed what I was telling her. 3 years, she said finally. At least. I stayed with him because I thought it was one mistake, one moment of weakness. It wasn't. She stared at the photos on my phone, her jaw tightening with each image. What do you want to do with this? I asked. I want to destroy him completely. I was hoping you'd say that. The plan we came up with was elegant in its simplicity. Elena would use the information about Michelle to reopen her divorce proceedings, claiming fraud and demanding a complete forensic audit of Trevor's finances. The Vegas trips, the money he'd been spending, the lies he'd been telling, all of it would come to light. Meanwhile, I would handle Daphne. The opportunity came at Danny's school Halloween carnival, one of those community events where everyone pretended to be happy families while secretly judging each other's costumes and gossiping about their neighbors' personal lives. Daphne had insisted on attending together, for Danny's sake, which really meant she wanted to maintain the appearance of normalcy while she figured out her next move. She'd been staying at her sister's place since our confrontation, but she still had keys to the house and was still technically my wife. The carnival was in full swing when we arrived, the school gymnasium decorated with orange and black streamers and filled with the sound of children laughing and parents making small talk. Danny was dressed as a superhero, complete with cape and mask, and he ran off to join his friends as soon as we walked in. Daphne and I stood awkwardly by the entrance, the picture of a couple going through the motions for their child's benefit. Colton! Daphne! Mrs. Kessler, our nosy neighbor, appeared beside us with the kind of smile that meant she was fishing for gossip. How wonderful to see you both here together. Wouldn't miss it, I said. And how are things with you two? I heard there was some excitement at your house the other week. Daphne's face tightened. The excitement Mrs. Kessler was referring to was probably the shouting match we'd had when Daphne came to collect her clothes, which had been loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. We're working through some issues, Daphne said carefully. Oh, I'm sure you are. Marriage is such hard work, isn't it? Especially when there are outside influences trying to interfere. Mrs. Kessler's eyes were bright with the kind of malicious curiosity that made small towns both charming and insufferable. Outside influences? I asked, playing dumb. Well, I don't like to gossip, but I couldn't help noticing that red sports car that's been parked on our street lately. Such an unusual car for our neighborhood. Daphne went pale. She'd obviously thought she was being discreet when Trevor picked her up for their secret meetings. I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Daphne said. Oh, I'm sure it's nothing. Just curious. You know how it is. Mrs. Kessler wandered off to spread her poison elsewhere, leaving Daphne and me standing in uncomfortable silence. She knows, Daphne said quietly. Everyone knows. You weren't exactly subtle about it. Colton, please. Can we just get through tonight without fighting? I'm not fighting. I'm just stating facts. The principal, Mrs. Henderson, approached with a microphone and a request for volunteers to help with the costume contest. Somehow, I found myself on stage, helping to judge the children's costumes while Daphne watched from the audience. It was while I was on stage, looking out at the crowd of parents and children, that I saw him. Trevor, standing at the back of the gymnasium, trying to blend in with the other parents despite the fact that he didn't have any kids at the school. He was watching Daphne, and she was watching him back, their eyes locked across the crowded room like something out of a romance novel. That's when I made my decision. I took the microphone from Mrs. Henderson and stepped forward. Before we announce the costume contest winners, I said, my voice carrying across the gymnasium, I'd like to take a moment to talk about something important. The crowd quieted, expecting some kind of inspirational speech about community or children or the importance of education. I want to talk about honesty, I continued, about the importance of being truthful with the people we care about, especially our children. Daphne was staring at me with growing horror, probably sensing where this was going. You see, kids learn from watching us. They learn about relationships, about commitment, about keeping promises, and when we break those promises, when we lie to the people we're supposed to love, we teach our children that dishonesty is acceptable. The crowd was completely silent now, everyone sensing that something dramatic was happening, but not sure what. Some of you know that my wife and I are going through a difficult time. What you might not know is that she's been having an affair with her ex-boyfriend, a man who's also married, a man who's here tonight pretending to be a concerned member of our community. Gasps from the audience. Daphne had gone white as a sheet. I'm not saying this to embarrass anyone or to air our dirty laundry in public. I'm saying it because I want our children to understand that actions have consequences, that lies eventually come to light, and that integrity matters more than temporary pleasure. I handed the microphone back to Mrs. Henderson and stepped down from the stage, walking through the crowd toward the exit. People parted in front of me like I was Moses crossing the Red Sea, their faces showing a mixture of shock, sympathy, and morbid fascination. I found Danny by the ring toss game, still oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. "Ready to go home, buddy?" I asked. "Can't we stay longer?" "Your mom will bring you home later. I just need to take care of some things." I kissed his forehead and walked out of the gymnasium, leaving behind a crowd of stunned parents and one very humiliated ex-wife. My phone was buzzing with texts before I even reached my car. Elena, who had heard about the carnival speech from a friend whose kid went to the school, was practically beside herself with glee. "That was brilliant," she wrote. "Trevor's reputation in this town is finished." She was right. In a community like ours, reputation was everything. Trevor would never be able to show his face at another school event, another community gathering, another local business meeting without people whispering about the married man who broke up a family. Daphne would fare no better. She'd have to live with the knowledge that everyone in town knew what she'd done, that every conversation would stop when she walked into a room, that every social gathering would be an exercise in humiliation. I drove home through streets that looked different now, like I was seeing them from a new perspective. The perfect lawns and pristine driveways still looked the same, but I knew better now. I knew that behind those doors were real people dealing with real problems, and that sometimes those problems required real solutions. When I got home, I poured myself a drink and sat in my office, looking at the notebook where I'd planned Trevor's destruction. Every step had worked exactly as intended. Every move had been calculated to cause maximum damage with minimum legal exposure. My phone rang. Daphne. "How could you do that to me?" she said, her voice thick with tears. "I didn't do anything to you. I just told the truth. In front of everyone, in front of Danny's friends' parents, in front of the whole community. You should have thought about that before you decided to screw around with a married man. I hate you. I know, but you'll get over it. Just like I'm getting over 15 years of marriage to someone who turned out to be a stranger." I hung up and blocked her number. Whatever she had to say to me from now on could go through the lawyers. Elena called an hour later. "Trevor's having a complete meltdown," she reported. "He showed up at my lawyer's office demanding to know how to sue you for defamation. She explained that truth is an absolute defense and sent him on his way." "How are you doing?" "Better than I have in years. The forensic accountant found the Vegas money, plus a lot of other things Trevor thought he'd hidden. I'm going to end up with everything, and he's going to end up with nothing." "Good. What about you? How do you feel?" I thought about that question. How did I feel? Satisfied? Vindicated? Relieved? "Free," I said finally. "I feel free." After I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my office, listening to the house settle around me. For the first time in months, I wasn't wondering where my wife was or who she was with or what lies she was telling. I wasn't second-guessing my instincts or making excuses for behavior that couldn't be excused. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. There's a difference. My computer chimed with a new email. Patricia Morrison, my divorce attorney, with an update on the proceedings. Daphne had signed the papers. The divorce would be final in 60 days. I opened a new document and started typing, documenting everything that had happened over the past month. Not for legal reasons. That was all handled. Just for myself, to make sure I remembered every detail of how I'd taken control of my life back from people who thought they could take it away. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into its evening routine. Porch lights coming on, families gathering for dinner, the comfortable sounds of suburban life continuing as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed, at least for me. I'd learned that sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose everything. Sometimes the only way to get respect is to stop asking for it and start demanding it. And sometimes the only way to move forward is to burn the bridges behind you so completely that going back isn't an option. Trevor and Daphne had wanted to play games with my life. They'd thought they were smarter, more sophisticated, more deserving than the boring husband who worked hard and paid his bills and tried to do the right thing. They were wrong. I finished typing and saved the document, then closed my laptop and went to the kitchen to make dinner. Just for me, for the first time in 15 years. It felt like a celebration. Tomorrow I'd start figuring out what came next. Tonight, I was just going to enjoy the silence and the knowledge that I'd won a war that I never wanted to fight, but had been forced into by people who underestimated what I was capable of. They'd called me ruthless, but they'd forgotten that I'd been married to the Queen of the Snakes for 15 years. I'd learned from the best, and when the time came to use those lessons, I'd been ready. Now they could deal with the consequences while I moved on to whatever came next. I was done looking backward.